We hear about large language models, or LLMs, pretty much every day, right? But what's actually happening inside that digital mind when you ask it a question? Let's pull back the curtain and really demystify the whole process.
Okay, let's dive right in. The big question we're tackling is what's truly happening when an AI like GPT or Gemini spits out a response. You know, it feels like magic, but the reality is this fascinating mix of just raw brute force, a whole lot of mathematics, and a few really clever tricks.
And a huge part of that reality is just sheer scale. I mean, to really understand how an AI brain works, we first have to appreciate what it takes to even build one. It is not like writing a clever piece of software. It's a truly monumental feat of engineering.
In fact, one source put it perfectly. Building a foundational AI model is like building a global power grid from scratch. Just think about that for a second. We're not talking about some simple project, but a foundational piece of global infrastructure. It's huge.
So how in the world do you build a global power grid of intelligence? Well, it turns out it really boils down to three core requirements: an absolutely unbelievable amount of data, the raw computing power to process it all, and maybe surprisingly, an army of human experts to guide the whole process.
And when we say massive data, we really mean it. The AI has to read, process, and find patterns in a library larger than any human could ever consume. We're basically talking about a significant chunk of the entire internet and all of human literary history.
And processing all that data? Well, that requires tens of thousands of supercomputers running nonstop for months. The cost is just staggering. We're talking about an electricity bill that alone can run into the tens of millions of dollars. Yeah, this is definitely not something you build in your garage.
So, after all that training, after consuming all that data, it leads to the most important question of all. Does the AI actually understand what we're saying to it? You know what? The answer might just surprise you.
This right here is probably the single biggest myth that we need to bust. We can't help but project our own human consciousness onto these tools, but what's happening under the hood is, well, it's fundamentally different from how our brains work.
So here's the fundamental difference. Our understanding, yours and mine, it's built on lived experience, on emotion, on real-world meaning. An AI's understanding, on the other hand, is built on pure mathematics. It's not grasping meaning, it's calculating the probability of which word should come next, based on all the context it's seen before.
You know, here's maybe the best way to think about it. Just imagine someone who has done nothing their entire existence but play a word association game billions and billions of times. They haven't lived life, but they have a perfect statistical map of which words tend to follow other words.
And here's a perfect example of that in action. When you say one horse, the AI reflexively says takes the lead. Why? Not because it has any idea what a horse is, or what a race is, or what it feels like to be in the lead. Nope. It just knows from analyzing trillions of words that one horse is very frequently followed by takes the lead. It's just pattern matching on an absolutely epic scale.
Okay, so now that we know it's really just a probability game, it becomes so much easier to understand why it sometimes gets things totally wrong, or as some people like to call it, why it hallucinates.
The single most important factor is something called context. Everything you type into the prompt, your question, your instructions, any examples you give it, all of that acts as the AI's short-term memory for that one specific conversation. It's the only world it knows in that moment.
So it makes sense, right? If that short-term memory is fuzzy because your prompt is vague, the AI just has less to work with. It's forced to fall back on its general training and make a statistical guess about what you probably want to hear. And that's exactly where the errors start creeping in.
So knowing all of this, the immense cost, the fact that it's all based on probability, what's the smart way for an organization or even just an individual to approach using this technology?
Well, the answer is simple, and it's timeless. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, or in this case, you don't need to reinvent the global power grid. You just leverage the incredible work that has already been done.
So the strategy becomes really clear. Instead of trying to build your own model from scratch, which we've established is a massive undertaking, you use the powerful ones that already exist. But the real magic, the secret sauce, happens in that third step, augmenting those models with specific tools to solve your unique problems.
And one of the most powerful tools for this is something called Retrieval Augmented Generation, or RAG for short. The best way to think of it is like giving the AI a very specific reference book for the task you're giving it. You're basically telling that statistical master, hey, for this conversation, don't use the entire internet. I only want you to use the facts in this specific book.
and that dramatically improves accuracy and relevance. Ultimately, it's really helpful to stop thinking of AI as some artificial brain that's here to replace ours. A better way to see it is as the most powerful amplification tool we've ever created. It's a tireless assistant, a brilliant pattern matcher, and a surprisingly creative partner. The only question left is, what are you ready to build with it?